Hello and welcome to this first look exploring session looking at Cornelia, translated by Thomas Kyd. It is from a play written in French by that excellent poet, Robert Garnier, who we have encountered before. This is not our first rodeo with Robert Garnier, because we have also looked at the tragedy of Antony. In fact, we have looked at it on the podcast, we've looked at it on the YouTube, and there is a full cast audio adaptation of the tragedy of Antony sitting in the Nedit suite that one day I will have time to actually finish. We know the form for Robert Garnier, and we are going to now see what Thomas Kyd does with this particular play. Pompey the Great is fair Cornelia's tragedy, affected by her father and husband's downcast death and fortune. So, should be cheerful. We have, reading this neoclassical epic over 2 sessions, reading today the part of Cicero is...
Hi, I'm Eric, and I forgot that this was a neoclassical play.
You were saying you missed them the other week. Reading Cornelia is...
Liza Graham. I remembered this was a neoclassical play.
Some people read the notes. Reading chorus is...
Rachael, Nicole, actor, New Jersey, sometimes 2 cats. I thought we were still reading that Gascoigne play up until 2 hours ago.
So yes, we've had to slightly move our schedule around for this text. Reading the opening dedication by Thomas Kyd, and also Philip is...
Hello, Dan, based in Montpellier, France. Thrilled to be reading Kyd/Garnier.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton. I would say I'm going to read some stage directions, but there are pretty much no stage directions, so I'm going to be making lots of notes. That's basically what I'm going to be doing, and sticking to looking out for the appearance of Catzilla at some point during proceedings. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Dan to read the dedication, please, to the virtuously noble.
To the virtuously noble and rightly honoured lady, the Countess of Sussex. Having no leisure, most noble lady, but such as evermore is travailed with the afflictions of the mind, that which the world affords no greater misery, it may be wondered at by some how I durst undertake a matter of this moment, which both requireth cunning, rest, and opportunity, but chiefly that I would attempt the dedication of so rough, unpolished a work to the survey of your so worthy self. But being well instructed in your noble and heroic dispositions, and perfectly assured of your honourable favours past, though neither making needless glosses of the one, nor spoiling paper with the other's pharisaical embroidery, I have presumed upon your true conceit and entertainment of these small endeavours, that thus I proposed to make known my memory of you and them to be immortal. A fitter present for a patroness so well accomplished, I could not find that this fair president of honour, magnanimity, and love, wherein what grace that excellent Garnier hath lost by my default, I shall beseech your honour to repair with the regard of those so bitter times and privy broken passions that I endured in the writing it. And so, vouchsafing but the passing of a winter's week with desolate Cornelia, I will assure your ladyship my next summer's better travel with the tragedy of Portia, and ever spend 1 hour of the day in some kind service to your honour, and another of the night in wishing you all happiness. Perpetually thus devoting my poor self, your honours in all humbleness, TK.
Yes, to start us on a downer, having assured your ladyship his next summer's better travail, the tragedy of Portia, isn't going to happen because Thomas Kyd will have an early onset death disorder coming very, very soon after writing this. So it's presumed to be written pretty much after he's been released from some pretty torturous imprisonment, and so is written and published in written for around 1594, and there's not much time left after that.
Was this when he was tortured?
Oh yeah.
And when he supposedly gave that testimony against Marlowe?
Yes, I'm fairly certain. Yes, this is all. Yes, he's released a little bit before this, so he doesn't have that much. I will dig out some additional details on this later on. I wasn't going to go into too much depressing detail before we started.
Well, what pinged out to me there in that epistle was, just saying, wherein what grace that excellent Garnier had lost by my default, i.e., if I didn't, write this tragedy as graceful as he did, I shall beseech your honour to repair with the regard of such of those so bitter times and privy broken passions that I endured in the writing it. And I think that pretty much everyone who has tried to write anything can relate to that. Although, as we know, Kyd had some very specific things he was talking about. And privy broken probably means that he communicated it to her personally in private, rather than broken like broken-hearted. It's like he broke his mind to her in private. I would interpret that as.
You are breaking up a little bit, Liza, as you speak. I just don't know what Wi-Fi you're currently on. Just checking that point. You have a little while before you speak.
In theory, I am on the good Wi-Fi. Am I very broken?
Occasionally. We'll see where you are when you begin, and if we need to say switch off video feed, we will. But hopefully, it will just.
I can go upstairs and reboot during Cicero if you'd like. Though I would be sad to miss Eric.
Well, yes, but Cicero, I think reboot during Cicero seems to be a default setting for most computers, so it might be a wise thing to try. Without further ado, having named Cicero, we should dive into Act 1. We're going to skip the argument. The argument is not an important element of the document, but we might throw that in at the beginning of next time just to get everyone into the plot, as it were. But we're going to run through each act in their totalities. The first act is relatively short. Cicero followed by chorus. So Cicero, take it away, please.
Vouchsafe, immortals, and above the rest, great Jupiter, our city's sole protector, that if provoked against us by our evils, you needs will plague us with your ceaseless wrath, at least to choose those forth that are in fault, and save the rest in these tempestuous broils, else let the mischief that should them befall be poured on me, that one may die for all. Oft hath such sacrifice appeased your ires, and oft ye have your heavy hands withheld from this poor people, when, with one man's loss, your pity hath preserved the rest untouched. But we, disloyal to our own defence, faint-hearted do those liberties enthrall, which to preserve unto our aftergood, our fathers hazarded their dearest blood. Yet Brutus Manlius, hardly Scaevola, and stout Camillus are returned from Styx, desiring arms to aid our capital. Yea, come they are, and fiery as before, under a tyrant's sea our bastard hearts lie idly sighing, while our shameful souls endure a million of base controls, poisoned ambition, rooted in high minds. 'Tis thou that trainst us unto all these errors. Thy mortal covetise perverts our laws and tears our freedom from our franchised hearts. Our fathers found thee at their former walls, and humbled to their offspring left thee dying. Yet thou, reviving, soil'st our infant town with guiltless blood by brothers' hands outlaunched, and hongst, O hell, upon a fort half finished, thy monstrous murder for a thing to mark. But faith continues. Not where men command. Equals are ever bandying for the best. A state divided cannot firmly stand. Two kings within one realm could never rest. This day we see the father and the son have fought like foes for Salia's miseries, and with their blood made marsh the parched plains, while the earth that groaned to bear their carcasses bewailed the insatiate humors of them both. that as much blood in willful folly spent as were to tame the world sufficient. Now Parthia fear no more, for Crassus' death that he will come by he for Crassus' death thou that he will come thy borders to besiege, nor fear the darts of our courageous troops, for those brave soldiers that sometimes were sometimes wont to terrify thee with their names are dead. And civil fury, fiercer than thine hosts, hath in a manner this great town overturned. That Willem was the terror of the world, of whom so many nations stood in fear, to whom so many nations prostrate stooped, o'er whom, save heaven, naught could signorize, and o'er whom, save heaven, nothing could affright, impregnable, immortal, and whose power could never have been curbed, but by itself. For neither could the flaxen-haired High Dutch, a martial people madding after arms, nor yet the fierce and fiery-humoured French, the Moor that travels to the Libyan sands, the Greek, the Arabian, Macedons or Medes, once dared to salt it or attempt to lift their humbled heads in presence of proud Rome, but by our laws from liberty restrained, like captives lived eternally enchained. But Rome, alas, what helps it that thou tidest the former worlds to thee in vassalage? What helps thee now that have tamed both land and sea? What helps it thee that under thy control the morn and midday, and both by east and west, and that the sun, the golden sun, where'er he drive his glittering chariot, finds our ensigns spread, sith it contents not thy posterity, but as a bait for pride, which spoils us all, embarks us in so perilous a way, as menaceth our death and thy decay. For Rome, thou resemblest a ship at random wandering in a boisterous sea, when foaming billows feel the northern blasts. Thou toilest in peril, and the windy storm doth topsy-turvy toss thee as thou floatest. Thy mast is shivered, thy mainsail torn, thy sides are beaten, and thy hatches broke. Thou want'st thy tackling, and the ship unrigged can make no shift to combat with the sea. See how the rocks do heave their heads at thee, if thou shouldst but touch, thou straight becomest a spoil to Neptune, and a sportful prey to the Glaucs and Tritons, pleased with thy decay. Thou vaunt'st not of thine ancestors in vain, but vainly count'st thine own victorious deeds. What helpeth us the things that they did then? Now we are hated both of gods and men. Hatred accompanies prosperity, for one man grieveth at another's good, and so much more we think our misery than the more that fortune hath with others stood. So that we seld are seen, as wisdom would, to bridle time with reason as we should. For we are proud when fortune favors us, as if in constant chance we're always won, or standing now, we should continue thus. O fools, look back and see the rolling stone whereon she blindly lighting sets her foot, and slightly sows that seldom taketh root. Heaven heretofore inclined to do us good, did favor us with conquering our foes, when jealous Italy, exasperate with our uprising, sought our cities full. But we soon, tickled with such flattering hope, waged further war with an insatiate heart, and tired our neighbor countries with charge, and with their loss we did our bounds enlarge. Carthage and Sicily we have subdued, and almost yoked all the world beside. And solely through desire of public rule, Rome and the earth are waxen all as one. Yet now we live despoiled and robbed by one of the ancient freedom wherein we were born. And e'en that yoke that wont to tame all others is heavily returned upon ourselves. A note of chance that may the proud control, and show God's wrath against the cruel soul. For heaven delights not in us when we do that to another which ourselves disdain, judge others as thou wouldst be judged again, and do but as thou wouldst be done unto. For sooth say, in reason, we deserve to have the selfsame measure that we serve. What right had our ambitious ancestors ignobly issued from the cart and plough to enter Asia? What, were they the heirs to Persia or the Medes' first monarchies? What interest had they to Africa, to Gaul or Spain? Or what did Neptune owe us within the bounds of farther Brittany? Are we not the thieves and robbers of these realms that owed us nothing but revenge for wrongs? The lives and liberties of all those nations whom we by force have held in servitude, whose mournful cities in shrieks heaven ascend, importuning both vengeance and defence against this city rich of violence. 'Tis not enough, alas, our power to extend, or overrun the world from east to west, or that our hands the earth can comprehend, or that we proudly do what like us best. He lives more quietly whose breast is made, and can with reason chasten his desire, than he that blindly toileth for a shade, and is with others' empire set on fire. Our bliss consists not in possessions, but in commanding our affections, in virtue's choice, and what vices needful chase, far from our hearts first staining of our face.
Upon thy back, where misery doth sit, O Rome, the heavens with their wrathful hand revenge the crimes thy fathers did commit. But if their farther fury to withstand, which o'er thy walls thy rack sits menacing, thou dost not seek to calm heaven's ireful king, a farther plague will pester all the land. The wrath of heaven, though urged, we see is slow in punishing the evils we have done. For what the Father hath deserved we know, is spared in him and punished in the Son. But to forgive the apter that they be, they are the more displeased when they see that we continue our offense begun. Then from her loathsome cave doth plague repair, that breathes her heavy poisons down to hell, which with their noisome fall corrupt the air, or meager famine, which the weak foretell, or bloody war, of other woes the worst, which where which it lights doth show the land accursed, and ne'er did good, where'er it befell, war that hath sought the Ausonian fane to rear. And warlike Ammoni, now grown so great, with soldiers' bodies that were buried there, which yet to sack us toils in bloody sweat, to enlarge the bounds of conquering Thessaly, through murder, discord, wrath, and enmity, even to the peaceful Indian's pearled seat, whose entrails firmed with rancor, wrath, and rage. The former petty combats did displace, and camp to camp did endless battles wage, which on the mountain tops of warlike Thrace made thundering Mars dissension's common friend. Among the forward soldiers first descend, armed with his blood besmeared keen cutelace, who first attempted to excite to arms the troops enraged with the trumpet's sound, headlong to run and wreak no after harms, wherein the flowered meads dead men were found, falling as thick through warlike cruelty as ears of corn for want of husbandry, that, wasteful, shed their grain upon the ground. O war, if thou wert subject but to death, and by desert mightst fall to Phlegethon, the torment that Ixion suffereth, or whose soul that vulture seizeth on, were all too little to reward thy wrath, nor all the plagues that fiery Pluto hath the most outrageous sinners laid upon, accursed caitiffs, wretches that we are. Perceive we not that for the fatal doom the fates make haste enough, but we, by war, must seek in hell to have a hapless room? Or fast enough do foolish men not die, but they, by murder of themselves, must hie, hopeless to hide them in a hapless tomb. All sad and desolate our city lies, and for fair corn ground are our fields surcloyed with worthless gorse, that yearly fruitless dies and chokes the good, which else we had enjoyed. Death dwells within us, and if gentle peace descend not soon, our sorrows to sore cease. Latium already quailed, will be destroyed.
And close Act 1, though how the units of action might want to be divided is a matter for discussion. So Rome is a bit screwed. It's done lots of good conquering. It's gone out, done some good stuff, but it's sort of it's tearing itself apart. And we're hearing that from Cicero's point of view. We're also hearing it from the chorus point of view. So we're getting a lot of things. I'm recognizing kinds of things that Robert Garnier is quite keen on. There's these ship sea imageries. I've recognised that kind of thing, and of course, always nice to have a callback to Fortune. Fortune always gets a name check in these things, but that gets a name check in most plays, frankly, where bad things happen in any way, shape, or form. Thoughts from the room. Anyone want to leap in? It's still early on in the action, as it were. Any initial thoughts, Dan?
This is actually it's very difficult to follow the action when it's not, I guess, when you're reading it cold and it's not being broken up into units. This is a play where it's really worth knowing what the structure of how it was initially structured, because if one were to look at the printing of this, they are broken up into units, or every single, like into sometimes really short units or really long units. Unfortunately, in our copy, we were only reading it so it's all in the same intent. But if you looked at the original printing, it will start off with the first line on the left margin, and then the rest of them up until that unit is done, indented in. That's to indicate where, okay, this is one full unit, something is going to be happening in this one before we move on to the next one. So I think that if one were to try to stage this, there's been an argument that this has never been staged, although I always want to know how somebody knows that or not, considering we don't have a record of it, therefore it wasn't staged. It doesn't make sense to me. But I think that would be the first step, is to figure out where the units are and then decide, okay, what's the prevailing action in each of these to get across.
Yeah, Liza.
Yeah, I was, further to Dan's excellent point, I was trying to work out, because there are ghosts of verse structure, not just rhetorical structure, but verse structure in those speeches. And there are even a couple of what look like complete stanzas in a 7-line form. And then there's some blank verse, and then there are just some couplets interjected, some of which seem accidental, others on purpose. I think often sections will end with a couplet that ends with a full stop is the basic rule that I just seat of my pants figured out while I was reading. But yeah, if one does the actor thing of breaking it down into, thought transitions, then the transitions seem to happen, the major transitions seem to happen after a couplet that ends with a full stop.
Rachael.
No, just the because they're so long that the flow, and I already reading this now, I already want to look at it a second time, just because of how the length and going into it cold affects the rhythm of it, and the rhythm in this is so important, because I don't know, it's just hard to maintain going in cold while also also knowing what I'm saying and all those things.
Eric.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that it was interesting because obviously my part had questions, and I was like, okay, so we're still going. Yeah, this question is still going, like 10 lines later. Still going. And it's like, okay, so what? I had no idea what I was saying, because it was like, where's the question mark at the end of this? But yeah, it was interesting to read. Sort of the building questions, the former world to thee in vassalage, what helps thee now, what helps thee, and then like it just gets longer and longer and longer, and then yeah.
Other thoughts? Otherwise, we'll go on into Act 2 and develop what's going on here, where we find out a little bit more about Cicero. We'll find out a bit more about Cornelia. I see nothing else. So let's go on. Let's get a little more data. Act 2, Cornelia and Cicero.
And will ye needs bedew my dead-grown joys, and nourish sorrow with eternal tears? O eyes, and will ye, 'cause I cannot dry your ceaseless springs, not suffer me to die? Then make the blood from forth my branch-like veins, like weeping rivers, trickle by your vaults, and sponge my body's heat of moisture so as my displeased soul may shun my heart. Heavens, let me die, and let the destinies admit me passage to the infernal lake, that my poor ghost may rest where powerful fate in death's sad kingdom hath my husband lodged. Fain would I die, but darksome ugly death withholds his dart, and in disdain doth fly me, maliciously knowing that hell's horror is milder than mine endless discontent, and that if death upon my life should seize, the pain, supposed, would procure mine ease. But ye sad powers that rule the silent deeps of dead sad night, where sins do mask unseen, you that amongst the darksome mansions of pining ghosts twixt sighs and sobs and tears do exercise your mirthless empery, ye gods, at whose arbitrament all stand, dislodge my soul, and keep it with yourselves, for I am more than half your prisoner. My noble husbands, more than noble souls, already wander under your commands. Oh, then shall wretched I that am but one, yet once both theirs survive, now they are gone? Alas, thou shouldst, Cornelia, have broke the sacred thread that tied thee here, when as thy husband Crassus in his flower did first bear arms and bear away my love, and not as thou hast done go break the bands by calling Hymen once more back again. Less hapless and more worthily thou mightst have made thine ancestors and thee renowned, if like a royal dame with faith fast kept, thou with thy former husband's death hadst slept. But partial fortune and the powerful fates, that at their pleasures wield our purposes, bewitched my life, and did beguile my love. Pompey, the fame that ran of thy frail honors made me thy wife, thy love, and like a thief from my first husband stole my faithless grief. But if, as some believe, in heaven or hell be heavenly powers or infernal spirits that care to be avenged of lovers' oaths made in marriage and after broke, those powers, those spirits, moved with my light faith, are now displeased with Pompey and myself, and do with civil discord furthering it untie the bands that sacred Hymen knit. Else only I am cause of both their wraths, and of the sin that sealeth up thine eyes. Thine eyes, O deplorable Pompey, I am she, I am that plague that sacks thy house and thee. For 'tis not heaven, nor Crassus, 'cause he sees that I am thine, in jealousy pursues us. No, 'tis a secret cross, an unknown thing that I received from heaven at my birth, that I should heap misfortunes on their head, whom once I had received in marriage bed. Then ye, the noble Romulists that rest, henceforth forbear to seek my murdering love, and let their double loss that held me dear bid you beware, for fear you be beguiled. Ye may be rich and great in fortune's grace, and all your hopes with hap may be affected. But if ye once be wedded to my love, clouds of adversity will cover you. So pestilently fraught with change of plagues is my infected bosom from my youth. Like poison that once lighting on the body no sooner toucheth than it taints the blood, one while the heart, another while the liver, according to the encountering passages, nor spareth what it purely feeds the heart more than the most infected, filthiest part. Pompey, what holp it thee? Say, dearest life, tell me, what holp thy warlike valiant mind to encounter with the least of my mishaps? What holp it thee that under thy command thou sawest the trembling earth with horror mazed, or where the sun forsakes the ocean sea, or watereth his coursers in the west, to have made thy name be far more famed and feared than summer's thunder to the silly herd? What holp it that thou sawest, when thou wert young, thy helmer decked with coronets of bays? So many enemies in battle ranged beat back like flies before a storm of hail. To have looked askance and see so many kings to lay their crowns and scepters at thy feet, to embrace thy knees, and humbled by their fate, to attend thy mercy in this mournful state. Alas, and herewithal, what holp it thee that even in all the corners of the earth thy wandering glory was so greatly known, and that Rome saw thee while thou triumphedst thrice o'er 3 parts of the world that thou hadst yoked, that Neptune weltering on the windy plains escaped not free from thy victorious hands, since thy hard hap, since thy fierce destiny, envious of all thy honours, gave thee me, by whom the former course of thy fair deeds might with a biting bridle be restrained, by whom the glory of thy conquests got might die disgraced with mine unhappiness. O hapless wife, thus ominous to all, worse than Megaera, worse than any plague! What foul infernal, or what stranger hell henceforth wilt thou inhabit, where thy hap none other's hopes with mischief may entrap?
What end, O race of Scipio, will the fates afford your tears? Will that day never come, that your disastrous griefs shall turn to joy, and we have time to bury our annoy?
Ne'er shall I see that day, for heaven and time have failed in power to calm my passion, nor can they, should they pity my complaints, once ease my life, but with the pangs of death.
The wide world's accidents are apt to change, and fickle fortune stays not in a place, but like the clouds continuously doth range, or like the sun that hath the night in chase, then as the heavens by whom our hopes are guided, do coast the earth with an eternal course. We must not think a misery betided will never cease, but still grow worse and worse when icy winter's past. Then comes the spring, whom summer's pride with sultry heat pursues, to whom mild autumn does earth's treasure bring, the sweetest season that the wise can choose. Heaven's influence was ne'er so constant yet, in good or bad as to continue it. When I was young, I saw against poor Scylla, proud Cinna, Marius, and Carbo fleshed so long till they gan tyrannize the town, and spilled such store of blood in every street as there were none but dead men to be seen. Within a while I saw how fortune played, and wound those tyrants underneath her wheel, who lost their lives and power at once by one. That, to revenge himself, did with his blades commit more murder than Rome ever made. Yet Sylla, shaking tyranny aside, returned due honors to our commonwealth, which peaceably retained her ancient state, grown great without the strife of citizens, till this ambitious tyrant's time, that toiled to stoop the world and Rome to his desires. But flattering chance that trained his first designs may change her looks and give the tyrant over, leaving our city, where so long ago heavens did their favors lavishly bestow.
'Tis true, the heavens, at leastwise if they please, may give poor Rome her former liberty. But though they would, I know they cannot give a second life to Pompey that is slain.
More not for Pompey. Pompey could not die a better death than for his country's weal. For oft he searched amongst the fierce alarms, but wishing he could not find so fair an end, till fraught with years and honor both at once, he gave his body as a barricade for Rome's defense by tyrants overlaid. Bravely he died, and haply takes it ill that envious we repine at heaven's will.
Alas, my sorrow would be so much less if he had died, his falchion in his fist, had he amidst huge troops of armed men been wounded by another any way, It would have calmed many of my sighs. For why, to have seen his noble Roman blood mixed with his enemies had done him good. But he is dead, oh heavens, not dead in fight, with pike in hand upon a fort besieged, defending of a breach, but basely slain, slain traitorously, without assault in war. Yea, slain he is, and bitter chance decreed to have me there to see this bloody deed. I saw him, I was there, and in mine arms he almost felt the poniard when he fell. Whereat my blood stopped in my straggling veins, mine hair grew bristled like a thorny grove, my voice lay hid half dead within my throat. My frightful heart, stunned in my stone-cold breast, faintly redoubled every feeble stroke. My spirit, chained with impatient rage, did raving strive to break the prison ope, and large to drown the pain it did abide in solitary Lethe's sleepy tide. Thrice to have sent me from this hated light, I would have plunged my body in the sea, and thrice detained with doleful shrieks and cries, with arms to heaven upreared, I 'gan exclaim and bellow forth against the gods themselves a bead roll of outrageous blasphemies, till grief to hear and hell for me to speak, my woes waxed stronger and myself grew weak. Thus day and night I toil in discontent, and sleeping wake when sleep itself that rides upon the mists scarce moisteneth mine eyes. Sorrow consumes me, and instead of rest with folded arms I sadly sit and weep. And if I wink, it is for fear to see the fearful dreams effects that trouble me. O heavens, what shall I do? Alas, must I myself be murderer of myself? Must I myself be forced to ope the way whereat my soul in wounds must sally forth?
Madam, you must not thus transpose yourself. We see your sorrow, but who sorrows not? The grief is common, and I muse, besides the servitude that causeth all our cares, besides the baseness wherein we are yoked, besides the loss of good men, dead and gone. What one he is that in this broil hath been, and mourneth not for some man of his kin.
If all the world were in the like distress, my sorrow yet would never seem the less.
Oh, but men bear misfortunes with more ease than more indifferently that they fall, and nothing more in uproars men can please than when they see their woes not worst of all.
Our friends' misfortune doth increase our own.
But ours of others will not be known.
Yet one man's sorrow will another touch.
Aye, when himself will entertain none such.
Another's tears draws tears from forth our eyes.
And choice of streams the greatest river dries.
When sand within a whirlpool lies unwet, my tears shall dry, and I my grief forget.
What boot your tears, or what avails your sorrow against the inevitable dart of death? Think you to move with lamentable plaints Persephone or Pluto's ghastly spirits, to make him live that's locked in his tomb and wandereth in the center of the earth? No, no, Cordelia, Charon takes not pain to ferry those that must be fetched again.
Proserpina indeed neglects my plaints, and hell itself is deaf to my laments. Unprofitably should I waste my tears, if over Pompey I should weep to death with hope to have him be revived by them. Weeping avails not, therefore do I weep. Great losses greatly are to be deplored. The loss is great that cannot be restored.
Naught is immortal underneath the sun. All things are subject to death's tyranny. Both clowns and kings one self-same course must run, and whatsoever lives is sure to die. Then wherefore mourn you for your husband's death, sith being a man he was ordained to die? Since Jove's own sons, retaining human shape, no more than wretched we their death could scape. Brave Scipio, your famous ancestor, that Rome's high worth to Afric did extend, and those two Scipios that in person fought before the fearful Carthaginian walls, both brothers and both wars' fierce lightning fires, are they not dead? Yes, and their death our Darth hath hid them both emboweled in the earth. And those great cities whose foundations reached from deepest hell, and with their tops touched heaven, whose lofty towers like thorny pointed spears, whose temples, palaces, and walls embossed in power and force and fierceness, seemed to threat the entire world that trembled with their weight. In one day's space to our eternal moans, have we not seen them turned to heaps of stones? Carthage can witness, and thou, heaven's hard handwork. Fair Ilium, raised by the conquering Greeks, whose ancient beauty, worth, and weapons seemed sufficient to have tamed the Myrmidons. But whatsoever hath been begun must end. Death, haply that our willingness doth see, with brandished dart doth make the passage free, and timeless doth our souls to Pluto send.
Would death had steeped his dart in Lerna's blood, that I were drowned in the Tartarian deeps. I am an offering fit for Acheron, a match more equal never could be made than I and Pompey in the Elysian shade.
Death's always ready, and our time is known to be at heaven's dispose and not our own.
Can we be over hasty to good hap?
What good expect we in a fiery gap?
To scape the fears that follow fortune's glances.
A noble mind doth never fear mischances.
A noble mind disdaineth servitude.
Can bondage true nobility exclude?
How, if I do or suffer that I would not?
True noblesse never doth a thing it should not.
Then must I die.
Yet dying, think this still, no fear of death should force us to do ill.
If death be such, why is your fear so rife?
My works will show I never feared my life.
And yet you will not that in our distress we ask death's aid to end life's wretchedness.
We neither ought to urge nor ask a thing wherein we see so much assurance lies. But if perhaps some fierce offended king to fright us set pale death before our eyes, to force us do that goes against our heart, 'twere more than base in us to dread his dart. But when for fear of an ensuing ill we seek to shorten our appointed race, then 'tis for fear that we ourselves do kill, so fond we are to fear the world's disgrace.
'Tis not for frailty or faint cowardice that men to shun mischances seek for death, but rather he that seeks it shows himself of certain courage gainst uncertain chance. He that retires not at the threats of death is not as are the vulgar slightly frayed. For heaven itself nor hell's infectious breath the resolute at any time have stayed. And sooth to say, why fear we when we see the thing we fear less than the fear to be? Then let me die my liberty to save, for 'tis a death to live a tyrant's slave.
Daughter, beware how you provoke the heavens, which in our bodies as a tower of strength have placed our souls, and fortified the same. As discreet princes set their garrisons in strongest places of the provinces. Now, as it is not lawful for a man, as such a king's departure or decease, to leave the place or falsify his faith, so in this case we ought not to surrender that dearer part till heaven itself command it. For as they lent us life to do us pleasure, so look they for return of such a treasure.
Whate'er the massy earth hath freight, or on her nurse-like back sustains, upon the will of heaven doth wait, and doth no more than it ordains. All fortunes, all felicities, upon their motion do depend, and from the stars doth still arise, both their beginning and their end. The monarchies that cover all this earth round with majesty have both their rising and their fall from heaven and heaven's variety. Frail men, or man's more frail defense, had never power to practice stays of this celestial influence that governeth and guides our days. No cloud but will be overcast, and what now flourisheth must fade, and that fades revives at last. To flourish as it first was made, the forms of things do never die, because the matter that remains reforms another thing thereby, that still the former shape retains, the roundness of two bowls cross-cast, so they with equal pace be aimed, shows their beginning by their last, which by old nature is new framed, so peopled cities, that of yore, were desert field, where none would abide, become forsaken as before, yet after are re-edified. Perceive we not a petty vein, cut from a spring by chance or art, engendereth fountains, whence again those fountains do to flood convert, those floods to waves, those waves to seas, that oft exceed their wonted bounds, And yet those seas, as heavens please, return to springs by undergrounds. E'en so our city in her prime, prescribing princes everything, is now subdued by conquering time, and liveth subject to a king. And yet perhaps the sun-bright crown, that now the tyrant's head doth deck, may turn to Rome with true renown, if fortune chance but once to check the stately walls that once were reared, and by a shepherd's hand erect, with hapless brothers' blood besmeared, shall show by whom they were infect, and once more unjust Tarquin's frown, with arrogance and rage inflamed, shall keep the Roman valor down, and Rome itself a while be tamed, and chastest Lucrece say once again, because her name dishonored stood, shall by herself be careless slain, and make a river of her blood. Scorning her soul a seat should build within a body basely seen, by shameless rape to be defiled, that erst was clear as heaven's queen. But, heavens, as tyranny shall yoke our bastard hearts with servile thrall, so grant our plagues, which they provoke, may light upon them once for all. And let another Brutus rise, bravely to fight in Rome's defense, to free our town from tyranny, and tyranny's proud insolence.
And close Act 2. We get sort of extension of Cicero gets an opening oration in Act 1, interrupted by the chorus. Cornelia gets an opening oration, and then the two of them get to go at each other's different viewpoints. Cicero seems to be much more concerned about the general bad, and Cornelia is much more worried about, I've seen some really bad stuff. I saw him. I was there. It's all so much more personal, and it's really interesting how some of that dialogue flows and the repetitions. Garnier just like the odd little random repetitions, but I and it's not even sort of end of line stuff. It's alas must I. It's like it's even though so much of this is very formal and structured in certain ways, it also breaks it up at times as well, that I'm finding really interesting. Definitions of great deaths. Don't mourn for Pompey. He died. Good things. And you go, no, I was there. It wasn't that good. And then the chorus. Oh, I really like the Act 2 chorus as well. Nothing lasts forever. All is in flux. Fortune, everything changes. I'm really, really, now we've sort of keyed into that really flowed nicely for me. I was enjoying that. Thoughts from the room? Rachael first, I think.
No, just that this section is so much clearer, and maybe it's like when we were reading Jocasta last week, that it's just that first act is the setup. And it's explaining so much of everything that it's harder to jump into cold than, when these people start talking to each other or start expressing their feelings. And then in the chorus that I just read, there's some stuff in it that just seems so provocative for the time. Something that I'm trying to go back and see what they were saying. Somebody else can talk in the meantime.
I'm not sure I quite go all the way with the Jocasta element, in the sense that Jocasta's the first act was a very, very heavy-handed. Whereas this, the opening riff by Cicero, it felt more that we just hadn't sort of locked into what this play was doing. In the sense of what Cicero's saying is actually relatively straightforward. He just riffs on it for a long time. Liza?
Yeah, I think both Cicero and the chorus in Act 1, the Jocasta first scene was exposition that was trying to be dialogue. And this isn't trying to be dialogue. It's just very nicely rhetorically constructed speeches. And I think it succeeds at that. I think it's very nicely written verse.
It's interesting because the choruses are quite different in structure, but that seems to be something that probably comes from Garnier. You see it in Tragi-comedy as well. That every chorus is structured in a slightly different way. and that there's interesting games going on with that. Dan?
Yes, I wanted to agree with that point about the chorus, the way that it's structured to give it definitely give it a different rhythm. I wanted to go back to the point that Liza had made about how it ends in the rhyming couplets, how you can basically are signposting the end of each unit. It's interesting. I dropped in the chat, and for those who want to look it up, it's available on Gallica. Whoever wants to look up the French the original play in French by Garnier, that pretty much everything is a rhyming couplet in there, and that Kyd has made the choice only to end units with the rhyming couplet. This has been an often criticized translation, especially because we had read the Sydney translation, the Countess of Pembroke's translation of Antoninus. That one was well received and has been reprinted. This has been reprinted once the following year, and in fact, it's not even really a reprint. It's the same thing with just a different title, and you can tell because the type is all the same, the punctuation's all the same, so it came from the same run of the printing. It's been criticized because Kyd has apparently, I guess, mucked about with the text in ways that people think, well, you shouldn't do that as a translator. He's made, one account was saying over 400 additions to it. I would say from what we've gone through so far that, I'm not familiar with either of these. I'm reading it for the first time now, but that Kyd seems to have been making a sensitive translation adaptation with his own amendments to make it more rhetorically powerful. And that would just be one tactic, I would say, is just the rhyming couplets. But also he's maintaining the important elements like repetition, like you were all saying, still maintaining the different structures for the chorus versus Cicero, who are both being a bit pedantic, a bit moralistic, whilst ignoring Cornelia's tragedy, I guess, basically saying in a way almost kind of get over it.
Yeah, I didn't quite write that in my notes, but yeah, he is a bit like that, isn't it? But I absolutely agree. I think that they're very different approaches to those two texts. I think this one works very nicely because it's still recognisably Garnier. I am no expert on Garnier. I've only scanned through the French. My GCSE French is not going to be good enough to make any actual value judgments. But yeah, it feels very valid. Liza, I think I saw a hand. I also then saw Rachael and then Eric. Or did I imagine that one?
Well, no, I forgot what I was going to say. Please go forward.
Rachael, then Eric.
No, I saw Liza wrote something in the chat, and it's what I was gonna say, that he's the chorus in the chorus. It sounds very talking about science, and hitting on science and these things. And I know there's talks of heaven and stuff, but it's so, I don't know. It sounds like it's talking about the scientific philosophy more of that time, and I don't know how provocative that would seem at the time that this was, coming out. But I don't feel like I've seen people be this explicit with science before.
Liza.
Sorry, I'll be quick. That was a really good point. I do love the natural philosophy in this speech, because I think the whole thing of that first Cornelia scene is, how do we accept death? And Cicero and Cornelia is saying death should make us grieve, death should make us wish to be dead ourselves, maybe we should follow the people we love into death. And Cicero is saying, no, death is inevitable, so we should accept it philosophically, and we should not get emotional over it. And sort of compounded with this is Rome is a culture. Rome, at least in the minds of the early modern people writing this play, Rome is a culture where suicide, in certain circumstances, is viewed as honorable. Where if you have no better option, then it's the most honorable thing to take your own life, rather than wait for someone to do it for you. But in early modern terms, suicide is a mortal sin, so if you kill yourself, you're going to hell. Cicero and Cornelia can't argue in those terms, but the thought is going to be there in the minds of the playwright, the actors, and the audience.
Eric?
I was going to make a few points. I was trying not to laugh when Cicero was like, we must not think that misery betided will never cease, but will grow worse and worse. It's like, you're trying to comfort a grieving woman, man. Be sensitive.
Cheer up, things will get worse.
But also, just the language he uses is very sort of warlike, political almost. I don't know what you would call it. It's like very sort of like talking about death and war and sort of arms and stuff, whereas Cornelia is sort of like, I don't know, when she describes Pompey's death, it's like, I saw him, I was there, and in mine arms he is very sort of visceral, very sort of focused on the body, my hair, my voice, my frightful heart, my spirit did raving strive and all that stuff. It's very sort of emotional, whereas Cicero is like, yeah, okay, we've done this before. I don't know, it's just interesting sort of changes and stuff. And well, I guess because we've read the tragedy of Antony, like that he wrote, and the translation. The whole bit about must I myself be murderer of myself is very sort of Cleopatra from that, except there's no children here, so it seems more acceptable. And it also reminded me of Gismunda as well, sort of mourning over, like, am I supposed to be alone now? My husband died, first husband died. Am I supposed to be alone and sort of die like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice that we've been able to do so many of these sort of neoclassical plays, the intercourt plays, as well as this, which has no auspice for it apart from the printing. But that's not to say that there wasn't some, because as I say, this kind of drama does have an audience out there. It does exist, but we have no evidence as of yet where it might have found a home. Any other thoughts before we crack into Act 3? No. Okay. Well, we might pause in Act 3. Act 3 is sort of more broken into scenes, but I'm kind of inclined to just let it have its head and let it do what it does. So we have the chorus, having been choric for a while, is now going to actually interact with people on stage. So we're going to start with Cornelia talking to the chorus. Cicero will later on return, and then Philip's going to join Cornelia as well, and that leads us towards the end. So those are the people in Act 3. So Cornelia and chorus.
The cheerful cock, the sad night's comforter, waiting upon the rising of the sun, doth sing to see how Cynthia shrinks her horn, while Clytia takes her progress to the east, where ringing wet with drops of silver dew, her wonted tears of love she doth renew. The wandering swallow with her broken song, the country wench unto her work awakes, while Cytherea sighing walks to seek her murdered love transformed into a rose, whom though she see to crop she kindly fears, but kissing sighs and dews him with her tears. Sweet tears of love, remembrances to time past with me that am to tears converted, whose mournful passions dull the morning joys, whose sweeter sleeps are turned to fearful dreams, and whose first fortunes filled with all distress afford no hope of future happiness. But what disastrous or hard accident hath bathed your blubbered eyes in bitter tears that thus consort me in my misery? Why do you beat your breasts? Why mourn you so? Say, gentle sisters, tell me and believe. It grieves me that I know not why you grieve.
Oh, poor Cornelia! Had not we good cause for former wrongs to furnish us with tears?
Oh, but I fear that fortune seeks new flaws, and still unsatisfied more hatred bears.
Wherein can fortune farther injure us? Now we have lost our conquered liberty, our commonwealth, our empire, and our honors, under this cruel Tarquin's tyranny. Under this outrage now are all our goods, where scattered they run by land and sea, like exiled us from fertile Italy to proudest Spain or poorest Gaetuli.
And will the heavens that have so oft defended our Roman wars from fury of fierce kings not once again return our senators, that from the Libyc plains and Spanish fields with fearless hearts do guard our Roman hopes? Will they not once again encourage them to fill our fields with blood of enemies, and bring from Afric to our capital, upon their helms the empire that is stole? Then, home-born household gods and ye good spirits, to whom in doubtful things we seek access, by whom our family hath been adorned, and graced with the name of African, do you vouchsafe that this victorious title be not expired in Cornelia's blood, and that my father now in the Afric wars the self-same style by conquest may continue? But wretched that I am, alas, I fear.
What fear you, madame? Cornelius, that the frowning heavens oppose themselves against us in their wrath. Ooh.
Yes, that's a type. The Cornelia should be Cornelia.
That the frowning heavens oppose themselves against us in their wrath.
Oh.
Let's just run those back. Go from the chorus. What fear you, madam? And let's let that sequence run naturally.
What fear you, madame?
That the frowning heavens oppose themselves against us in their wrath.
Our loss, I hope, hath satisfied their ire.
Oh no, our loss lifts Caesar's fortunes higher.
Fortune is fickle,
but hath failed him never.
The more unlike she should continue ever.
My fearful dreams do my despairs redouble.
Why suffer your vain dreams your head to trouble?
Who is not troubled with strange visions?
That of our spirit are but illusions.
God grant these dreams to good effect be brought.
We dream by night what we by day have thought.
The silent night that long had sojourned now 'gan to cast her sable mantle off, and now the sleepy wane man softly drove his slow-paced team that long had travelled, when like a slumber if you term it so, a dullness that disposeth us to rest, 'gan close the windows of my watchful eyes, already tired and loaden with my tears. And lo, methought came gliding by my bed the ghost of Pompey, with a ghastly look, all pale and brawn-fallen, not in triumph borne amongst the conquering Romans as we used, when he enthronized at his feet beheld great emperors fast bound in chains of brass, but all amazed, with fearful hollow eyes, his hair and beard deformed with blood and sweat, casting a thin, coarse linsel o'er his shoulders, that torn in pieces trailed upon the ground, and gnashing of his teeth unlocked his jaws, which slightly covered with a scarce-seen skin, this solemn tale he sadly did begin. Sleep'st thou, Cornelia? Sleep'st thou, gentle wife, and seest thy father's misery and mine? Wake, dearest sweet, and o'er our sepulchres in pity show thy latest love to us. Such hap as ours attendeth on my sons, the self-same foe and fortune following them. Send Sextus over to some foreign nation far from the common hazard of the wars, that, being yet saved, he may attempt no more to venge the valor that is tried before. He said, and suddenly a trembling horror, a chill cold shivering settled in my veins, break up my slumber when I oped my lips 3 times to cry, but could nor cry nor speak. I moved my head, and flung abroad mine arms to entertain him, but his airy spirit beguiled mine embracements, and unkind left me embracing nothing but the wind. O valiant soul, when shall this soul of mine come visit thee in the Elysian shades? O dearest life, or when shall sweetest death dissolve the fatal trouble of my days, and bless me with my Pompey's company? But may my father, extreme mishap, and such a number of brave regiments made of so many expert soldiers that loved our liberty and followed him, be so discomfited? Oh, would it were but an illusion.
Madame, Never fear, nor let a senseless idol of the night increase a more than needful fear in you.
My fear proceeds not of an idle dream, for 'tis a truth that has astonished me. I saw great Pompey, and I heard him speak, and thinking to embrace him oped mine arms, when drowsy sleep that waked me unawares did with his flight unclose my fearful eyes so suddenly that yet methinks I see him. Howbeit I cannot touch him, for he slides more swiftly from me than the ocean glides.
These are vain thoughts or melancholy shows that want to haunt and trace by cloistered tombs, which aids appear in sad and strange disguises to pensive minds deceived with their shadows. They counterfeit the dead in voice and figure, divining of our future miseries. For when our soul the body hath disgaged, it seeks the common passage of the dead, down by the fearful gates of Acheron, where, when it is by Acus adjudged, it either turneth to the Stygian lakes, or stays forever in the Elysian fields, and ne'er returneth to the course interred, to walk by night, or make the wise afraid. None but inevitable conquering death descends to hell with hope to rise again. For ghosts of men are locked in fiery gates, fast guarded by a fell, remorseless monster, and therefore think not it was Pompey's sprite, but some false demon that beguiled your sight.
And they exit. Enter Cicero.
Then, O world's queen, O town that did extend thy conquering arms beyond the ocean, and throngst thy conquests from the Libyan shores down to the Scythian swift-foot fearless porters, thou art embased, and at this instant yields thy proud neck to a miserable yoke. Rome, thou art tamed, and the earth, dewed with thy blood, doth laugh to see how thou art seniorized. The force of heaven exceeds thy former strength, for thou, that once to tame and conquer all, art conquered now with an eternal fall. Now shalt thou march, thy hands fast bound behind thee, thy head hung down, thy cheeks with tears besprent before the victor, while thy rebel son with crowned front triumphing follows thee. Thy bravest captains, whose courageous hearts joined with the right did reinforce our hopes, now murdered lie for foul to feed upon. Petreius, Cato, and Scipio are slain, and Juba, that amongst the Moors did reign. Now you, whom both the gods and fortune's grace hath saved from danger in these furious broils, forbear to attempt the enemy again, for fear you feel the third calamity. Caesar is like a brightly flaming blaze that fiercely burns a house already fired, and ceaseless launching out on every side consumes the more you seek to quench it. Still darting sparkles till it find a train to seize upon, and then it flames amain. The men, the ships wherein poor Rome affronts him, all powerless, give proud Caesar's wrath free passage. Naught can resist him, all the power we raise turns but to our misfortune and his praise. 'Tis thou, O Rome, that nursed his insolence. 'Tis thou, O Rome, that gavest him the first sword which murder-like against thyself he draws, and violates both God and nature's laws, like moral Aesop's misled country swain that found a serpent pining in the slough, and full of foolish pity took it up, and kindly laid it by his household fire, till waxen warm, it nimbly gan to stir, and stung to death the fool that fostered her. O gods that once had care of these our walls, and fearless kept us from the assault of foes! Great Jupiter, to whom our capital so many oxen yearly sacrificed, Minerva, Stator, and stout Thracian Mars, father to good Quirinius, our first founder. To what intent have ye preserved our town, this stately town, so often hazarded against the Samnites, Sabines, and fierce Latins? Why, from once footing in our fortresses have ye repelled the lusty warlike Gauls? Why, from Molossus and false Hannibal have ye preserved the noble Romulists? Or why from Caitlin's lewd conspiracies preserved ye Rome by my prevention. To cast so soon a state so long defended into the bondage where enthralled we pine, to serve no stranger but amongst us, one that with blind frenzy buildeth up his throne. But if in us any vigor resting, if yet our hearts retain one drop of blood, Caesar, thou shalt not vaunt thy conqueror long, nor hold us longer in this servitude. Nor shalt thou bathe thee longer in our blood, for I divine that thou must vomit it, like to a cur that carrion hath devoured, and cannot rest until his maw be scoured. Think'st thou to sing your eyes or be the king of such number nobler than thyself? Or think'st thou Romans bear such bastard hearts to let thy tyranny be unrevenged? No, for methinks I see the shame, the grief, the rage, the hatred that they have conceived, and many a Roman sword already drawn to enlarge the liberty that thou hast usurped, and thy dismembered body stabbed and torn, dragged through the streets, disdained to be born.
And exit Cicero. Enter Cornelia and Philip.
Amongst the rest of mine extreme mishaps, I find my fortune not the least in this. I have kept my master company, both in his life and at his latest hour. Pompey the Great, whom I have honoured with true devotion, both alive and dead. One self-same ship contained us when I saw the murdering Egyptians bereave his life, and when the man that had affright the earth did homage to it with his dearest blood, o'er whom I shed full many a bitter tear, and did perform his obsequies with sighs. And on the strand upon the riverside, where to my sighs the water seemed to turn, I wove a coffin for his course of segs, that with the wind did wave like bannerets, and laid his body to be burned thereon, which when it was consumed, I kindly took, and sadly closed within an earthen urn the ashy relics of his hapless bones, which having scaped the rage of wind and sea, I bring to fair Cornelia to inter within his elder's tomb that honoured her.
Ah me, what see I?
Pompey's tender bones, which in extremes an earthen urn containeth.
Oh, sweet, dear, deplorable cinders! Oh, miserable woman, living, dying! Oh, poor Cornelia, born to be distressed! Why liv'st thou toiled that dead mightst lie at rest? Oh, faithless hands that under cloak of love did entertain him to torment him so! Oh, barbarous, inhumane, and hateful traitors! That this your disloyal dealing hath defamed your king and his inhospitable seat of the extremest and most odious crime that 'gainst the heavens might be imagined. For ye have basely broke the law of arms, and outraged over an afflicted soul, murdered a man that did submit himself, and injured him that ever used you kindly. For which misdeed, be Egypt pestered with battles, famine, and perpetual plagues. Let aspics, serpents, snakes, and Libyan bears, tigers, and lions breed with you forever, and let fair Nilus, wont to nurse your corn, cover your land with toads and crocodiles, that may infect, devour, and murder you. Else earth make way, and hell receive them quick. A hateful race mongst whom there doth abide all treason, luxury, and homicide.
Cease these laments.
I do but what I ought to mourn his death.
Alas, that profits not.
Will heaven let treason be unpunished?
Heavens will perform what they have promised.
I fear the heavens will not hear our prayer.
The plaints of men oppressed do pierce the air.
Yet Caesar liveth still.
Due punishment succeeds not always after an offence. For oftentimes 'tis for our chastisement that heaven doth with wicked men dispense, that when they list, they may with usury for all misdeeds pay home the penalty.
This is the hope that feeds my hapless days, else had my life been long ago expired. I trust the gods that see our hourly wrongs will fire his shameful body with their flames. Except some man resolved shall conclude with Caesar's death to end our servitude. else God to fore myself may live to see his tyrant course lie toiling in his blood, gored with 1,000 stabs. Round about the wronged people leap for inward joy. Then come murder, then come ugly death, then, Lethe, open thine infernal lake. I'll down with joy, because before I died, mine eyes have seen what I in heart desired. Pompey may not revive, and Pompey dead, let me but see the murderer murdered.
Caesar bewailed his death.
His death he mourned, whom while he lived to live like him he scorned.
He punished his murderers.
Who murdered him but he that followed Pompey with the sword? He murdered Pompey that pursued his death, and cast the plot to catch him in the trap. He that of his departure took the spoil, whose fell ambition, founded first in blood, by naught but Pompey's life could be withstood.
Photis and false Achilles he beheaded.
That was because that Pompey being their friend, they had determined once of Caesar's end.
What got he by his death?
Supremacy.
Yet Caesar speaks of Pompey honorably.
Words are but wind, nor meant he what he spoke.
He will not let his statutes to be broke.
By which disguise, whate'er he doth pretend, his own from being broke he doth defend. And by the trains wherewhich he us allures, his own estate more firmly he assures.
He took no pleasure in his death, you see.
Because himself of life did not bereave him.
Yea, nay, he was moved with former amity.
He never trusted him, but to deceive him. But had he loved him with a love unfeigned, yet had it been a vain and trustless league, for there is nothing in the soul of man so firmly grounded as can qualify the inextinguishable thirst of signory. Not heaven's fear, nor country's sacred love, not ancient laws, nor nuptial chaste desire, respect of blood, or that which most should move, the inward zeal that nature doth require. All these, nor anything we can devise, can stop the heart resolved to tyrannize.
I fear your griefs increase with this discourse.
My griefs are such as hardly can be worse.
Time calmeth all things.
No time qualifies my doleful spirit's endless miseries. My grief is like a rock, when ceaseless strain fresh springs of water at my weeping eyes, still fed by thoughts like floods with winter's rain. For when, to ease the oppression of my heart, I breathe an autumn forth of fiery sighs, yet herewith all my passion neither dies, nor dries the heat the moisture of mine eyes.
Can nothing then recure these endless tears?
Yes, news of Caesar's death, that medicine bears.
Madam, beware, for should he hear of this, his wrath against you 'twill exasperate.
I neither stand in fear of him nor his.
'Tis policy to fear a powerful hate.
What can he do?
Madam, what cannot men that have the power to do what pleaseth them?
He can do me no mischief that I dread.
Yes, cause your death.
Thrice happy were I dead.
With rigorous torments.
Let him torture me. Pull me in pieces. Famish. Fire me up. Fling me alive into a lion's den. There is no death so hard torments me so as his extreme triumphing in our woe. But if he will torment me, let him then deprive me wholly of the hope of death. For had I died before the fall of Rome and slept with Pompey in the peaceful deeps, save that I live in hope to see ere long that Caesar's death shall satisfy his wrong.
And they exit, leaving the chorus.
Fortune and power imperious, used o'er the world in worldly things thus to tyrannize. When she hath heaped her gifts on us, away she flies. Her feet more swift than is the wind, are more inconsistent in their kind than autumn's blasts. A woman's shape, a woman's mind, that seldom lasts. One while she bends her angry brow, and of no labor will allow. Another while she fleers again, I know not how, still to beguile, fickle in our adversities, and fickle when our fortunes rise. She scoffs at us, that, blind herself, can blear our eyes, to trust her thus. The sun that lends the earth his light, beheld her never overnight. Lie calmly down, but in the morning following might perceive her frown. She hath not only power and will to abuse the vulgar wanting skill, but when she list, to kings and clowns doth equal ill, without resist. Mischance that every man abhors and cares for crowned emperors, she doth reserve, as for the poorest laborers that work or starve. The merchant that for private gain doth send his ships to pass the main upon the shore, in hope he shall his wish obtain, doth thee adore upon the sea or on the land, where health or wealth or vines do stand. Thou canst do much, and often helpst the helpless band, thy power in such. And many times disposed to jest, gainst one whose power and cause is best, thy power to try, to him that never put spear in rest, givest victory. For so the Libyan monarchy, that with Ausonian blood did die, our warlike field, to one that ne'er got victory, was urged to yield. So noble Marius, Arpine's friend, that did the Latin state defend from Cimbrian rage, did prove thy fury in the end, which naught could sough. In Pompey, whose days haply led, so long thou seemst to have favored in vain, 'tis said, when the Pharsalian field he held, implored thine aid. Now Caesar, swoln with honor's heat, sits seniorizing in her seat, and will not see that fortune can her hopes defeat, whate'er they be. From chance is nothing franchised, until the time that they are dead, is no man blessed, he only that no death doth dread, doth live at rest.
And with one of the oddest line structures that we've actually gone over in a play, that is the end of Act 3. And Act 3 is all about Caesar. He might not be there, but suddenly we've gone to this enemy that we must name, who may have been inferred earlier, but just hasn't had the name checks, and that seems to be driving material that in otherwise might seem, oh, that's quite similar to what we've had before, but now it's being focused in a direction that I find really interesting here. And we have these different scenes doing all sorts of different jobs of work, and I find that really, really interesting. So we start by talking to the chorus. Cornelia actually talking to the chorus. The chorus isn't some distanced figure. We've got a sense of who they are now. Gentle sisters, so they're women of Rome on some level like that, which we haven't really stated previously who the chorus might be. And yeah, chorus make that silly question of what could get worse? You know, surely we've seen all the bad stuff now, and Cornelia just wants to fill them in, and possibly it might get worse. And then you get that great speech about the ghost.
Oh, the ghost!
The ghost! We've got to talk about the ghost.
Oh my gosh!
Fab.
Well, first of all, like, I know I love how Cornelia has two-handed scenes with just about everyone, and so it's lovely to read with all of you. And Rachael, I think we found something lovely in that scene. I really enjoyed your chorus reading, oh man, that now from what I can gather, the Cornelia of this play slightly conflates two different Cornelias. There was a Cornelia who was the daughter of Scipio Africanus, who was the mother of the Gracchi, but then there was another Cornelia who was the wife of Crassus and then Pompey. But this play seems to say that the Cornelia who was the wife of Crassus and Pompey was also the daughter of Scipio Africanus, and that gives the playwright an excuse to make her dream prophetic dreams, because what does an overly literate early modern person know about Scipio? They know the dream of Scipio. I don't know whether it was Scipio Africanus or his dad who wrote or about whom the dream of Scipio was written, but anyway, she has prophetic dreams. She sees her zombie husband. She tries to give him a hug. She fails. You can't hug ghosts. But the description of her poor decaying zombie husband is great, and it's practically a one-person opera, this speech, but he tells her that her father has had bad luck in Africa and is dead, and he tells her to get her son Sextus Pompeius away, which I hope that she does.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Rachael.
I know Cornelia isn't a chorus, but that she's the constant throughout this scene. It's almost like she is the chorus. She's the beat or the person that we keep returning to. I don't know. And that energy in that one scene between us during that one part was, really interesting. And then the ending chorus, it's only looking back on it now that I see the rhythm that it's meant, that there's some stopping on the four liners, which I didn't get the first time, and it makes it's so much easier in the meaning of the words and the direction that Kyd is trying to point the actor in so much clearer. But it's just a structure that I was not expecting.
Yes,
and ran over.
Yeah, for the viewers at home, that final chorus is very strangely laid out. It's really, really interesting.
It is. It's not easy, and it was very well read. I was, sorry, one quick point. I was thinking earlier about, how earlier the chorus was getting very science-y? And in the scene where Cornelia talks about the ghost, the chorus is also very rooted in things we can prove. And because the chorus says, well, we just dream about what we are thinking about by day, and dreams aren't true, and they're not prophetic, and ghosts aren't real. And Cornelia is like, no, I know what I saw. So the chorus, again, being the voice of reason. Yeah.
Dan?
I probably should look up which play it was, but I'm guessing it was probably Antoninus. This is a play that, in the way that it's printed, and I have no doubt it was printed very carefully to follow exactly specific instructions and how it should be, is a rhetorical play. I mean, we all know, but that during the time period, likely when plays were read, they were read orally, of course. And all of the clues are there in the structure of how these parts should be read. And what's really interesting about the scene, because as has been pointed out, how Cornelia goes around with everybody there, how the rhythms change with each of them, but then also the verse structure, also the way it physically appears on the page itself. The final scene read by Rachael there, or the final speech read by Rachael, the chorus, is structured in such a way that every third line or so is really further indented to the right. It's basically telling you it needs to be set apart, each of these units there. Whereas when you go to Cornelia, once after chorus and after Cicero go through the rounds with them, trying their things, given these sententia, they're always marked with inverted commas. Once you get to Philip, all of a sudden, Cornelia basically just goes into very long units of denting. Apparently, Philip is not convincing at all. And so now when he tries to do his sententia, which is always marked in inverted commas, she just fires right back at him.
Could you be more descriptive as to what you mean by that and the inverted commas, etc.?
So the inverted commas are indicated in the script. These are normally, these are called commonplace markers at the time, where in the print, they will have two, what you would call, quotation marks or inverted apostrophes to indicate that, if you're a commonplacer, you should write this down in your commonplace book because this is highly quotable. Or it can also be done to say, well, I'm quoting another passage from such and such source, like maybe a Bible passage or something like that. Or I got something really wise to tell you, instead of actually telling you something on the level of to directly rebut your argument or to try to convince you of something, I'm going to give you this general philosophy that you should follow. And this is a tactic that's being used over and over in the first two acts by the chorus and Cicero. Sometimes Cornelia will do sort of the same thing, but that's kind of their default whenever Cornelia says, but I can't get over this death. I can't get over it. Well, I'm going to give you some general wisdom now. What's funny is when Philip then tries this, you can just see Cornelia just firing right back, enough of this. So it's about like, okay, well, you better luck next time. You're not being very successful in your argument.
Eric.
It's also interesting because she starts off sad, grieving. So it's kind of like going through the stages of grief in a weird way. It goes from like, not quite denial, but like a beginning of acceptance, and then it gets into like depression/sadness. Then it gets into anger, and I'm curious to see whether we're gonna have the next stage as well. No, it's just sort of interesting psychologically as well.
Rachael.
Back to the chorus part where Cornelia and the chorus were going back and forth. Liza, how you said that it's conflating her with this other Cornelia. It's like two Cornelias. One who was a like prophetess almost, or the dream of Scipio. I wonder if because it's her dreaming of this dead person, and the chorus hasn't yet interacted with any other living person and talked to them, if the chorus itself is another sort of like spiritual being visiting her, but it's the way it's written is maybe ambiguous, and that it's arguing logic with her. Could it be an extension of herself trying to argue this logic, but out of an out of body thing? I don't know, because that's also is that also where she's having that speech of her dead husband? Yeah, I don't know. It would just be more gothic and more strange to have it, and yeah.
Liza, did you?
I do, but I also see Eric's hand.
Yeah, we'll come to Eric in a second. Yeah.
I like that very much. I mean, if I were a director putting this play on stage now, saying like, who are the chorus would be a major question of mine, and what do the chorus represent? Do they represent? Yeah, I mean, they certainly seem to have knowledge that the other characters don't have, or don't necessarily have. They seem to take a view over a greater distance. But then Cornelia addresses them as human beings who are weeping. So that's a really interesting point, and a really interesting sort of departure point for potential stage work.
Eric.
Yeah, I was gonna make a separate point, but then because we're talking about the chorus, I'll talk about the chorus, and then because in Greek tragedy you have that thing of the chorus also represents the people in a way, where the sort of, for example, in Medea you've got the chorus of Corinthian women who are responding to Medea and also like cursing her and so on and so forth. So you've got that interaction. What I was gonna say earlier was that there's like I think 4 lines where Cornelia goes she talks about how her dead husband, so on and so forth, and then send Sextus over to some foreign nation far from the common hazard of the wars. And that bit reminded me of what we had in Cleopatra however many weeks ago, which was basically her sending her child abroad and sort of realizing that he might have been killed later on, which was I don't know, it was just a very beautiful piece of writing in Cleopatra, and that's what that reminded me of.
Yeah, there's some I mean, that question of who the chorus is, but also why are these people talking to each other? It's interesting in the relationship. Cicero, why is Cicero and Cornelia having this convo? Do you want to give it a context, or should we not give it a context because it's this pairing might be quite artificial in various ways? I want to turn to Cicero now, because Cicero turns up in the middle, doing a sort of venti cursey kind of thing, but again, it's not quite the same kind of thing that he was doing earlier. And Cornelia's the first to bring up Caesar in the shall we call scene 1 when talking to the chorus, and then Cicero just punches in Caesar's name again and again. And he is the person who's bringing about all this death and destruction. There seems to be additional news that bad things, your side is doing very, very badly, and that just leads. It's almost like there's a leaping off from in the next scene, even though Cornelia hasn't engaged with Cicero, but Cornelia is doing in that conversation with Philip. Is also just this direction of travel that the play is now going in. Once you speak Caesar's name, it just keeps multiplying in the text. I'm finding that quite interesting. Eric, then Liza.
Yeah, that last bit that Cicero did was like, it felt very sort of 300. We are few, but we are strong, kind of thing. I don't know.
Liza.
I did like the Cicero speech, and it just occurred to me that in Cornelia's first scene in this act with the chorus, she's talking about interacting with her husband's ghost, and in the next one she's brought his actual ashes, so she's interacting with that reality, which is kind of a neat little thing.
And I love the weakness of Philip or his arguments. He basically just goes, "Hi, Caesar's really sad that this came down this way. Will you forgive him now?" No. So there's something weirdly pathetic about Philip that I quite like. It's not a criticism at all, and I wouldn't play him weak, but it's something just sort of, it's such a straw man argument, really, that it's so easily destroyed.
I just like that there's a guy named Philip in this play. It's like Cicero, Cornelia, Cassius, Philip.
It's Phil.
Yeah. It was a little hard to figure out what his role was going to be in this. I was thinking, I'm not sure if I'm familiar with this character. Let's just see how it goes. The only clue I had was the structure of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the kind of one where if he just came on it and his name was actually Nuncius, then you'd actually have a better idea what to do with him than actually giving him a name like Philip. I have to say, once we tuned in, and that's always sometimes the problem with a text like this, is what you need to tune into it. But once you do it, it really rewards, and that's found with so many of the neoclassical stuff. At the moment, in my mind, I'm really, I said really like to. I'm sort of already starting to plan in my head that this would make a very nice audio piece. We're talking about staging these things, but also in other media as well, not just the stage. There's a way of leaning into some of this, what this is doing, but then isolating the ghost sequence. I think the ghost would make a fascinating short video all of its own right. You could, with a really nice budget and just really go all out goth on it, you could really go to town with that and have a lot of fun. Just as a semi-immediate project, that's something you could really pull out of this. That's what I always like about these texts, is that actually they give you so many more ideas for what you might want to do with it than actually a play that presents you with, here is a script that is a perfect outline for how you by and large should stage this text. It gives us more imaginative room for maneuver. Rachael, I saw hands, I think.
No, how you were saying, to get tuned in with some of these texts. I think with the, these neoclassical ones that we touch on in the evening a lot, there's always so much, the form is so much more malleable, and there's so much experimentation with the form that even if the theme is the same, there's so much newness and so much language to play with there. Yeah.
And also what I like structurally about what it's giving us is it's given us a very nice end of the first half. here. You know, we've got the Cornelia just going. Caesar's death shall satisfy us wrong. I want Caesar dead. That will do me very nicely. Thank you very much. Could I have Caesar to be dead, please? Chorus talks about Fortune's wheel again. I don't know if it actually says Fortune's wheel, but fortune being fickle is an ongoing thing. Eric.
It occurred to me while I was reading Cicero that he's kind of more the sort of gritty and down to earth guy, whereas Cornelia is the more mythological one, it seems, because she's the one who references Romulus. If I remember correctly, I can't remember. Whereas he sort of goes, "Yes, father to good Quirinius, our first founder," and I'm like, I have no idea who that is, but I'm assuming that was like sort of someone who was important in Rome at the time. But it just sort of struck me as very sort of, he's got old facts. He doesn't have any like sort of what's called I mean, aside from maybe the mention of Troy, he's very sort of war report guy, basically.
Okay, so we're into extra time. Final thoughts from the room, as ever. Lean towards what we might do with this in live performance or mediated in some way. What more could we, should we, would we like to do with this text? Liza, I'll go to you first.
Well, I mean, I'm liking this text much better than from first glance I thought I might. Whether it is stageable as a piece of theater is a whole nother question. Like, I would happily support any effort to try or to find out by experiment if it is stageable.
It's so stageable. It's so stageable. It's just a matter of how you sell it.
Yeah. I mean, it would work quite nicely with audio. You could tour a production round to goth festivals, really easily. The ghost speech might be fun to just make a video of. That to me that looks like the hit. But all the scenes have some spark of life in them. I love the combative single line dialogues that are usually rhymed couplets where one is finishing another's rhyme and saying, well, if you think that, then I think this. And it feels like the ringing of swords in a sword fight. What can be done with this text to answer that question? I don't know, but there are definitely possibilities.
Rachael, any final thoughts?
Somebody in the chat before was saying about, like a lineup of Roman plays or the beginnings of that. I think, I like that idea. And I like that, making a timeline a little bit for these plays. I really like this. I like Kyd. He has, there's always something underneath the language, and there's more to dig into this. And I'd love, like, if we ever do evening second looks or something like that, to, I know we're not done with it, but to revisit it already, because there's so much still to glean from it. There's more I could say, but I forget it. Just in general, I like it. I don't know how you'd stage it.
Eric, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one because there are those long speeches. We won't talk about the length of the speeches because we know it's neoclassical. It's gonna be long. It kind of, I don't know. It feels like a lot like Jocasta, Cleopatra, the Tragedy of Antony. It's got like a home, which is kind of weird. But it's still kind of more alive than any of those because of the combative dialogue that Liza mentioned. Yeah, I don't know. It's still kind of weird. I mean, I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen because obviously it is a tragedy, obviously, and I don't know the story, and I am curious.
Dan, final thoughts?
I really love the idea of having this as a radio play. I think that's a very strong choice for this type of rhetoric there. I see two possibilities for this, both of which I think, I mean, this is me being an early modern geek, but I think this is such an easy sell one of two ways, or both ways. One is Robert Garnier. You have a, Countess of Pembroke, who is very much in vogue right now. Do Marc Antoine in this play, or you do the Thomas Kyd, the works of Thomas Kyd, of which there are not many. And the one everybody knows, I mean, it's an A-lister, is Spanish tragedy. So I no doubt there's going to be an audience for anything else by Kyd, because we all know the titles and we've never seen them or never heard them. So Solomon Percival, people know the title. This one, maybe not, but they know that he did a translation of something with Countess of Pembroke, or not with her, but one was also done of Garnier. So yeah, I think I think this is highly doable, and I would put it pretty high on my personal list, which is why I want to participate in this reading.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of doing a mini pop-up festival doing the complete works of Kyd, because basically you do a main house show that is the Spanish tragedy, smaller events looking at in a studio space doing the other text in some way, shape, or form, and that would work incredibly well. Just mentioning, yes, in the chat we're talking about, we are starting to build up chains of Roman plays, doing in the same way we got chains of English history plays as well, of material that are doing very different games with different parts of history, and to do seasons along those lines. That's the thing, is actually selling individual plays is incredibly hard. And there's actually almost no point in trying. The point is building something that people will buy into as an overall narrative, or either the narrative of this is about Kyd, or this is about X, Y, or Z. I think those work very nicely, because yes, you're talking about Tragedy of Antony. They almost slot together. Not quite, but pretty damn close. And you don't need to do that much more to connect that. And then we've got another chain going on to Cleopatra, which is commissioned by her as well. So it's there's a lovely train of events, absolutely. This has options. The other thing is that I love about neoclassical drama, it's really cheap. Putting my really cynical hat on, you don't need many people to do it, and that makes life a lot easier for certain things. All that remains is to thank all these wonderful people. We will return for the second half of this play anon, when the lineup changes, and even the chorus. Will the chorus make it to the very end? The answer is no. An alternative chorus will step in at some point in a way that Garnier seems to like doing. Anyway, all that remains is to thank all these wonderful readers. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye. I saw him. I was there.